Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of facility design. First of all, thank you so much for last week's class. When we had to leave, it was a lockdown emergency, which ended up being a test, although all of the announcements said this is not a test. Please prepare to fight back. So anyways, we went through, we did the in-class assignment. For those of you who weren't able to complete it because of tech issues, because of perhaps COVID, this week you'll get a bit of a pass. I've already communicated with you, those of you who weren't able to submit it, and I gave you a little bit of extra time. Again, this first week is just one of those assessments and assignments to get used to the software as we start going into a little bit more complex things to design. So this week, what we're going to do is that we're going to start with the back of house and equipment. So while the front of house is what the customers and the residents see, the back of house is often what we also call the heart of the house. And it's a lot more important how we structure and what kind of equipment that we purchase in order to make sure that we're going to have a proper setup. So we'll go through some of the factors affecting the selection of food service equipment. We'll go through a bunch of the actual equipment that exists to give you an idea of what you should be looking for. And we'll look at some of the back house equipment materials and maintenance and replacement. Okay, so there are 7 ways in which to determine. Let me maybe move this here for you. I'll be up here in the corner. There we go. There are 7 ways in which to determine how we want to choose our equipment. So the first of all is going to be obviously the menu. So the menu is the first stop. It's the main tool of analysis. It'll tell you at a minimum what you need for your location. So the menu must be created before the equipment is purchased. Often these places already exist, but you will probably see in your lifetime, in your career, that new long-term care, new residential retirement homes, as well as, new generic food and beverage operations are created from scratch. So it's a new build. So you must create the menu before you build the kitchen. Now you might be able to kind of build out the space that the kitchen would fall into, but you need to know the complete menu and also have maybe a bit of an idea of how this menu can change. So as an example, maybe you have chilies and shepherd's pies and heavier based food that you are often serve in the winter, but as you will then start serving lighter fare in the summer, you'll need to understand how that's could change. Sorry about my dog. Are you going to bark this whole time? You know what? Get over here. Jackson, come here. Come here. Just so everyone knows, this is Jax. He's a pug. Boston Terrier. He's barky. He's annoying. Okay, go. Okay, pardon me for that intrusion. So rude, Jackson. Okay, the next one is the number and the type of patron that you expect to have. So, a 500-person banquet versus a 75-seat dining room, they may have the same processes and equipment, but the size of them would vary, right? The holding capacities of them, how many you're able to cook at a particular time. So the patron numbers directly affect the batch and the size. How many customers do you expect to see in a dining period, right? So if you have a capacity for 220 people, logically you have to assume amongst all of your equipment, you may have 220 entrees or meals being created within a fairly small amount of time. So you have to kind of keep that in mind that should you need to, your equipment can handle it. Now it's rare if you have a 220 seat capacity, it's rare that you'll fill up every single seat. Just often people might come in, there's a couple that comes in and sits at a table that can handle 4 people, right? They're obviously not going to fill in those other 2 seats with strangers. So you usually, even on really busy nights, you usually only receive about 80 to 90% of capacity. Some of the other ways is the form of the food in which we purchase. So how are we purchasing and in what form is it coming in the back doors? Is it raw? Now, raw is preferable. Raw means fresh. It's not frozen. This requires more fridge space. It may require some more dry storage space. And it also has a different level of perishability that we have to concern ourselves with. It also could be coming in frozen, which means it needs more freezer space, but that perishability, we have a lot more time in which to work with it. The more on-process food purchase requires more equipment for processing. As an example, if I bring in French fries frozen, that's fine, and it doesn't take a whole lot of room, as opposed to bringing in just bags of potatoes, but then I'll need to clean them, cut them, blanch them, store them, and it's just a little bit more of a process. I'll need some more tables, I'll need knives and cutting boards and sinks and all that stuff. Less frequent delivery schedules require more storage. So if you have a delivery only once a week, you have to deliver enough food to hold off all of your customers and feed them all for a single week. Most places get 2 to 3 deliveries per week. That way they're able to store it, because storage does cost a lot. And also, you don't know what kind of level of business that you're going through. Long-term care might be easier just because they're more of a captive audience, I guess you call it. But really, you don't know how much they're going to eat and who's going to order what. So trying to pinpoint that for an entire week is quite difficult. The next one is also the style of service. So how are we serving the food? So if it's basically ordered fresh and it's brought to your table in a typical server fashion, that's fine, table d'hote style. It could be a self-service. So in the days of COVID, buffets essentially were gone, but now they're starting to come back because we understand, in a long-term care retirement home capacity where everyone's vaccinated and everyone's there, and you're not allowing other unvaccinated people into the property, buffets might work very well. You might have order service requires pass-through windows or hot or cold holding tables and heat lamps. You also may require in-room dining, so thermal boxes and delivery carts. So to ensure that my kitchen on the first floor can make it to a different wing on a fourth floor and still serve dinner to a resident that's nice and hot. When we think about long-term care and retirement versus just your standard food and beverage operation, the health level and the nutrients really come into play. Whereas we want to serve delicious food, not necessarily healthy food, in a commercial food and beverage institution. In a non-commercial, which is long-term care and retirement homes, we are really concerned with the nutrition of them. So ensuring that the hot food gets to the resident and they eat enough of it and it's delicious enough that they get enough nutrients in their body to maintain their health, it matters. And it can be wrecked by bringing in something that should be nice and hot and piping in delicious, and it's cold and it's been sitting there for half an hour. They might not get the nutrients they need. So this is what we call a kitchen pass-through. So you've often seen these. These are all heat lamps right here. And then typically what happens is that you put them under the heat lamps to keep the food warm. So this is the difference of what could be serving 2 individual tables versus plates that would go into a thermal box. They may go through something like this or a pass or be loaded completely in a different area. So that's what we call the pass. And usually there's somebody on the other side of this pass called an expediter. Now, it could be just servers come up, they check the little chits of where these dishes are going to go, and they run them out. In larger establishments, you'll have a manager or an expediter, or this could be even yourself, where you're not necessarily the chef, but you're ensuring all the meals come out the way that they should be prepared. Maybe they're not, and also in the form. So when you go through your food modification course, you understand there's a bunch of different forms in which the food can take. So you might be that last check. We're making sure, it's prepared properly. You didn't put salt on this dish. All of the things that need to be done. We also look at labor hours and workers' abilities. So we often have a budget, usually labor for a food and beverage commercial. So when I say commercial, it's all the normal restaurants. It's usually around 30%. And this is front of house and back of house and manager all in there. So we usually have a labor budget or a labor market. So it can be a limited labor market. It is right now. And you can probably see there's a bunch of postings for cooks starting at $20, $25 an hour, just because they're so desperate in which to get people in there. So sometimes when the labor market is limited, such as right now or in remote locations, you may want to purchase more labor-saving equipment, and then that way you can have less people, and you can kind of make sense of the expensive labor-saving equipment that costs several $1,000s. But if you're paying someone $20 an hour, you're paying them $40,000 a year. So if you can cut out one full-time employee by using different equipment, it might make sense for you. Managers must weigh the cost of equipment versus employees. And the equipment costs include the initial, there's also the cost of maintenance, interest if you're not paying for it outright, and then installation. There's also some training involved with that. And then also employee cost is the initial training and orientation. They're rising wages. So if you hire them for $20 an hour and minimum wage goes up 3 times in the next 3 years, they're not going to be happy still at $20 an hour. So they have a rising wage. What's their effect on productivity and limited hours? Next one is utilities. So specific equipment requires different types of utilities, such as different electrical outlets, hood ventilation, and we'll talk about that more. Is it natural gas? There might be some separate sewer or plumbing hookups, and depending on where your location is, you might not be able to have certain styles of equipment. So replacing old equipment may increase or decrease utility bills depending on what is being replaced. And most equipment nowadays will give you a tag on the actual piece of equipment to tell you this is the expected cost for a household. When we go through and look at all the equipment that we'll purchase for our major project, it should give you an estimate of how much it's going to cost to run inside an actual food service establishment. And then finally, we have the budget. So the budget is the overall cost of all the equipment as well as installation. Often the budget is never going to be enough. That's the thing with budgets. There's never enough money to get all of the nice toys that we want and all of the nice equipment we want. So we have to look at it and make smart, savvy decisions. So it might be one of those things where as a food nutrition manager and you're also running the kitchen, so you're responsible for the menu, but you're also responsible for ensuring that you have the equipment that can complete that menu, that can serve that menu. So it might be one of those things you say, I plan growth in my menu. I plan to do different things as we go. Maybe it's planting gardens on site and having your own herbs. But then you also need to know that over time, some of your equipment will start to degrade and depreciate. So you might say, okay, I'm going to get that used pizza oven right now because it's not really in our budget, knowing full well that over in the next couple of years, I'm going to replace that with a nice big brand new one. But until we get the money, until we can prove it with our business level, I won't do it yet. So budget is it's not a one-time thing. It's an ever-evolving process where you're always looking at how much money you have, how much money is coming in, how long would it take you to pay off for a certain piece of equipment, what kind of labor savings would a certain piece of equipment have, or is it just actually going to cost you more, not only in the piece of equipment, but training people to use it properly. So this is a big one right here. This is probably the first one that you look at and the last one you look at on as far as factors that affect what kind of food service equipment you will purchase. Now there's many different types of food cooking equipment, and now that technology has really just started to kind of come out with these wonderful new things, these are a minimum. Right? There's some very cool ways in which now to cook food. Typically, you won't see this in a commercial environment, those really high-end ones, because until their price points are just too expensive. So until it becomes like a normal piece of equipment that most restaurants can handle and pay for, that's when the price goes down on those. But you will see convection ovens, char broilers or grills, flat top griddles, steam kettles for cooking and steaming vegetables while also maintaining the nutrient level on a lot of that. When you boil it, you don't keep the same amount. Pasta cookers, deep fryers, while not healthy, it is delicious and it's a great way of cooking some things. A salamander is usually like the, what's it called on an oven? A broiler, like a broiler or a salamander. A broiler is just high heat. Usually it's great for like melting cheese and toasting things. Salamander is actually the name of the brand, but everyone just calls it a salamander now. It's like Kleenex. You don't ask for a tissue, you ask for a Kleenex usually because Kleenex just has that branding. There's stovetops and ranges and saute stations. a cold station where you usually do all your desserts, salads, and sandwich prep, hot station and steam tables. And then we have some more of the equipment. So steamer as well as a steam kettle. They're both a little different, but one's for using steam to boil items, and it's a very clean boil, so the heat's not necessarily just on the very bottom like a pot would be on a stovetop. And a steamer, and that's for your vegetables and your seafood and your lobster and things like that. Exhaust hoods and pass-through heat lamps. So the first one we're going to look at is the cold station. So these are these prep tables. There's a lot of universal sizes. So as you can see here, and I think they're 30 inches deep is the standard size. And this might be, I don't know, 36 inches per door here. So you can buy it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It really doesn't matter. You can have, these are refrigerated units, but they can also be pull-out drawers. It's very adaptable. So you get to pick what equipment you're going to have in your restaurant. So this is a refrigerated unit. It gives you a cold table up here. You know, you would see these at a Subway. So all of their ingredients are there. It's all cold, and they can create the sub on their little area. So nothing too special or new that you haven't seen. Same thing as we can also have the hot station or steam table. So we'll have big inserts that go into here, but we can choose whatever size insert that we like. It keeps water underneath and it keeps it to a boil. And these are, so you can keep your mashed potatoes and your vegetables and a pasta and all the stuff that you need to keep hot. So as those orders come in, you don't need to, heat them up individually. They're all ready and good to go. This is an automated pasta cooker. So there could be, it could be a single unit. It could be 6 different. So it could be bigger ones. This is an individual portion pasta cooker. So it automatically immerses it, times it, and then can raise it when it's done. So it's really fantastic. It saves a lot of time, and you get the timing down pat as well. Burners, we've seen these often used for cooking, boiling, steaming. They often run on liquid petroleum gas. And we also now have induction burners and hot plates, which operate on electricity. So a lot of these are like propane based or natural gas based, but they're also going to be just electricity, and they work great. And this is your salamander broiler, which can also be used as a toaster, and it's powerful infrared ceramic boilers out there as well. So broiling perfect steaks even, I wouldn't suggest it, but you can melt cheese on casseroles and nachos, do all kinds of stuff with them. So ovens, there's many different types of ovens, and the ovens really do have a big impact on your design of your kitchens. So they're often used for cooking, right? They're used for pizza ovens. They're used for baking. You can do big roasts. You can just use things for browning. So in case you wanted to make stuffing or something along those lines, they operate either on gas or electricity. Now, a convection oven is the most commonly used, and it's what the majority of people have in their home. You also have the rack oven. So it's a set of stacked racks that often placed one above the other in a stainless steel frame. I'll show you what they look like. And these are large volumes. So when I worked at Casino Rama, because we have so many different restaurants and buffets and big banquet halls, we probably had a room of 50 of these huge tall ovens, and they were nonstop being used. There's a deck oven, so it can contain racks or rotisseries, and they can turn in there. And a tunnel oven, which comes in direct heat and indirect heat variants, and it's often suitable for high temperature baking. So these are some of the ones we're talking about. You have your standard convection ovens, which we often see. The majority of all restaurants will have these. You can have your rack ovens, something like this, great for baking. Deck ovens, which have different uses, different temperatures, which you can all set. And then these are some of your pizza wood-fired electric ovens that exist as well. Most of the time, you're going to see these if you're big enough, especially if you are that long-term care, because now you might be doing a lot more breakfast. You might have to be baking all your own bagels and breads and all kinds of stuff. So this might work very well. There are griddles and flat tops. Again, a huge breakfast piece of equipment. As you can see, the majority of all these are kind of breakfast staples. So they're mainly used for preparing breakfast items, omelets, eggs, patties, sandwiches, burgers, pancakes, so on. Usually it's located right beside the grill, or the char broiler. So you can have a grill portion and then you can have a flat top. It uses the same style of heat. It's most commonly gas fired, but can be wood fired. In the way that we're using it, you'll probably just use a straight grill, and it'll just be gas and won't be wood. And then deep fryers. They are delicious. They come either gas or electric. Same thing, they have a cleaning system for safe handling of hot oil, and often another piece of equipment. So the really good ones will filter and clean your oil within them already. This one here probably has that system where you can see it comes right underneath the bottom. It'll filter, drain, and go at the bottom, and you can either throw it back in after if it's clean enough, or you can have to dispose of it. This one here is a dangerous one because you would have to filter it yourself and essentially be like pouring it out. So ensuring that we have a safe one is very important. And then our cooking ranges. So cooking ranges is the most versatile because they have a range of functions where you can be cooking, flat top, grill, saute, deep fryer, or a pot. I think this might be a pasta one. So as you can see, on this one here, you'd have two sets of people working on either side. This is for a huge restaurant. Usually there's just a single-sided cooking range, but it's all very dependent on what you're trying to do and the space that you have. In the Georgian College dining room, actually, it is kind of a double-sided one that exists in there already. And I'll do a virtual tour of the space before we get to the project, so you know what's already in there. Kettles are used for cooking, warming, and storing food, and they're often a two-layered pot, one inside the other. And in between the gaps are used for steam. So we tap our own trees at Georgian College, and we make maple syrup in these kettles. So they're often used for soups, gravies, sauces, things like that. And then we have mixers. So, often people will refer to them as a Hobart, which is just, again, a brand name. But these are really big mixers. And you can have different beater options in there. So a flat beater for mashing and beating foods, a wire for whipping things, a dough arm that works with dough. There's even additions on here that you can put on that will grate your cheese for you or do things like that. They're really useful in a large capacity resident home or long-term care, especially because you can make different consistencies of food. They're not nearly as useful in a smaller restaurant setting. Dishwashers. Spend money on your dishwashers. Get a good dishwasher. So these are automatic dishwashing machines, but need some human interaction. So you'll be preloading and sending them through. Often what happens is you can have a conveyor belt system. You can have a single rack, which you push in a single rack and you just pull the handle down and it automatically does a clean, and then you got to pull it out. These conveyor belt systems can cost over $100,000. These single-use ones are much less expensive, but depending on the size of it, you can also get a single rack or a double rack. So it could be two full racks in there, and then you still pull it down to start it. And you also have these basic style ones. These are typically used maybe up in a bar area as a glass dishwasher because they're not really as convenient. They have no spray off function. They have no exit platform. So these are used in the back of house. This might be used up behind a bar, so you can just wash your stemware, your glassware. And this is used for a large one. The one at Casino Rama, it's a 2-tier conveyor belt system. So there's 2 of these, or even 3 maybe. It's a monster. It's like $150,000. It's like 30 feet long. 3 people operate it. It's pretty cool to see. Next part is exhaust hoods. So the reason why these are important is because they are legislated and it's a mandatory thing that you need to have for fire safety. So all these exhaust hoods, you all have to come with a fire suppressant system, which if it goes off, it's very expensive and you have to close the restaurant down. So if you have gas equipment underneath the hood or are doing any frying, you'll be required to have fire suppression with the hood. So anything gas, anything with a flame needs to be underneath one of these exhaust hoods. These exhaust hoods they're about $1,500 to $2,000 per foot. So that if you buy a 3-foot grill, which is really not that big, you need to have, so you got to think about the cost here. 3-foot grill, okay, it's going to cost me $5,000 for this, sure. But then if you have a 3-foot hood above it, which you require by law, it might be another $4,500 to $6,000. You also just can't add more room. So when you first install this hood, you want to make sure that it's not wasted space, but big enough for future growth if you think that you're going to grow, or if new pieces of equipment are going to need to come in. So you just got to keep that in mind. They're very expensive, but it's mandatory by law. There are things like convection ovens. So convection ovens can be electric, which is fantastic. They don't need to go underneath any of these hood systems unless they have meat in them. So if you're doing pizzas, it won't work because you have pepperoni and sausage and other things like that. If you're just baking buns or bagels or donuts or something like that, it's completely fine. It's that flammability of the grease that comes with it that needs them underneath one of these hoods. Otherwise, you can keep it aside. So you might have a convection oven under here, as well as another one in like a prep area of your restaurant that's just not used for meat. And then work tables. There's never enough work tables. There's never enough sinks. There's never enough space. So when you are doing your back of house designs, the idea is that you always, in areas that don't require a piece of equipment, aren't being used for storage, have work tables, because you always need more space to do some stuff. And there's going to be some areas that you look at and you say, oh, well, it's kind of empty, especially along walls. Use that space, because something like this and even these give you a ton of storage as well as workable space, and a sink here to dethaw things, not dethaw, just thaw things. Have these as much as possible around your place. So when we look at flexibility, some of the design principles, we look to flexibility and modularity, which means flexible, we have the ability to accommodate when new items come in, and there's a different style in which we're preparing food or a different service. So usually, let's say we went from a buffet style service and now we actually want to go and do some table side service. So we're going to go out and do like a little, make them omelets right in front of them. So do we have the ability to move some of our equipment and do something like that? Modularity means that most things are modular, which means there's a standard size of things. So 30 inches deep is usually the kitchen depth of any kind of table. As far as wide goes, it can be up to the piece of equipment, but they're usually fairly standard as far as like a fridge, 36 inches, a grill might be 48 or 24. Usually have the same amount of connections, and also the height. I think the height is usually 36 inches high, but I could be wrong on that. Most tables are 30 inches. High top tables are 42 inches in height. These might be a little bit higher than 30. 30 to 36 is usually the standard, but whatever it is, it's always the same. So if you buy a piece of equipment that's incorrect height, then you have this weird drop off. It's dangerous. Someone can set a dish down and it's on the edge and it'll flip and fall down. You just got to be careful with the way that you purchase based on flexibility, the ability to change, and modularity. Everything stays the same. I can roll out a piece of equipment that I don't use too often and roll in another one quite simply. As far as materials that we can use, and there are many, stainless steel seems to be the most widely used as it doesn't stain. It's reasonably priced. It is attractive. It doesn't react to food. There's some good stuff there. Copper has a high upkeep and can react to certain foods. Aluminum is very cheap. It's the cheapest, and a lot of areas will use some aluminum. It is thermal, so it conducts heat really well, and is used in many pieces of equipment, but can be very weak. So depending on what you're looking for, you'll see a lot of inserts that are aluminum, and you'll see a lot of inserts that are stainless steel. And by insert, I mean something like this that goes into a drawer. And then there's cast iron, so it's heavy, it's durable, it transfers heat very evenly, and it can be used for large pieces of equipment. So like the flat top could be out of cast iron, right? Skillets, griddles, things like that. Usually not used in smaller pieces too often. You know, every family has maybe a cast iron pot or two, but they're very heavy. So as they get bigger, they should be stationary. They shouldn't be a huge pan like this, twice or three times the size, because it's just too heavy and it's going to be a safety issue. And then finally, we have to maintain all these pieces of equipment, right? So it's an investment into our business. We purchased a lot of material. So what we'll be doing is that we'll be purchasing this equipment and also maintaining it. And to ensure that we're doing that, we have to have SOPs, standards, standard operating procedures, which, how do we clean the equipment? How often do certain things become cleaned? So as an example, you might not sweep underneath all your fridges every day, but maybe you do it every Wednesday night. And that's the closing cleaning duty for some of your staff. So having those standard operating procedures and standard cleaning procedures for equipment is integral to keep up the maintenance of them. Using the specific cleaners and equipment recommended by the manufacturer. Be careful with that. Sometimes they recommend a specific cleaner because they make it and it's very expensive. But as long as it's the same material, you can get it from anywhere, that's good. And then also record any maintenance work on a maintenance log or equipment log. And this is what it is. And ideally what you do is you have a binder that's just kind of hanging from a wall inside plastic sheets, so they can pull it out and they can write this down as it goes through. So every time that you have to do some sort of maintenance on a piece of equipment, it is recorded. They know when you purchase the equipment, the last time you serviced it, and this can really help you as well, just in case something were to happen, or you need, if you have a warranty. So you can show all of your equipment has been kept up to service, and if you have a warranty on a piece of equipment and you want to get a free one, this might actually be the make or break or the reason that you were able to do so. How we purchase these things really requires a lot of background research. They call it due diligence, means do your research, do your looking, make sure you get quotes. There are some best practices that are out there. So first, you want to research companies to ensure they're reputable. Take a look at reviews of equipment. Take a look at the review for the warranties, for the customer service. You know, if you want to work with Anella as an equipment company, great, but just check them out, because some companies are fantastic and some are not, and you want to know, okay, they're the best price, but they have a weak customer service. Is that going to be an issue for me? Always look at several different models. So even at Georgian College, if we want to buy a new computer or desk, we need a minimum of 3 quotes. That's just what we need to do. So 3 companies need to quote us on that piece of equipment, and then we choose one. And at Georgian, I know we often choose the most expensive because we want it to last the longest, and we don't want to replace it because it takes time and effort to get new quotes and replace and all this stuff. So we end up usually getting the best that's out there. You get what you pay for, and it's very true. And when you're asking for quotes, ensure you're asking for the right piece of equipment. So similar looking equipment can have very different specifications. So this is the way that we purchase stuff. We look at the specs, as they call it, the specifications. So there'll be an item number. So here they have an item number on this one. They have a bunch of different item numbers right here. The name of the item. So this is a gas deep fryer. And again, they'll have a bunch of different units. So this is like a single basket. There's double, there's triple, there's extra long, there's extra deep, all kinds of stuff. Dimensions, very, very important as far as your layout is concerned. Materials, so I'll tell you it's all stainless steel construction, 2 nickel-plated oblong wire mesh baskets, 1 nickel-plated tube rack, 1 drain, built-in heat deflector, 6-inch adjustable legs. Okay, it gives you all the breakdown. How much the price is, I don't think they're showing price on this one in particular. And that is something that's difficult. Often they'll show you all the features, the items. And when they start talking about price, because price is negotiable, they often don't like to post a price online if you're looking through this stuff. Rather, they'll say, okay, well, yeah, if you're buying this, it's $1,200, but you can get them down to $1,000. Or if you're buying this, it's $1,200, but if you buy another piece of equipment, I can drop a couple $100s off. So the price is actually the most difficult one to get because there's always a little bit of a wiggle room. Delivery date, warranty. So is it 1-year parts and labor, 5-year corrosion, what kind of fuel type it's also using. and how much. So BTUs is shown here, so how much heat's being used, the overall temperature range, oil capacity, how much it weighs. All of these things should have a place in your decision-making process of what kind of equipment you're going to buy. When pricing out this new piece of equipment, the price also, it's not just the price, it's what the price stands for. So yes, what is the listed price, but what is the estimated lifespan or trade-in value? So is there any kind of idea of, hey, this is going to last me 5 years, or is it only going to last me 2 years? Because I look at lifespan and I take that price and expand it over the lifespan. So a 10,000 piece of equipment that's last 10 years, I don't think of it as a 10,000 piece of equipment, piece of equipment. I think of it as $1,000 a year to use this piece of equipment, as long as I take care of it properly. I want to extend it over the lifespan of that item. There might be a trade-in value. So you might buy something for $10,000 and you expect to get $1,000 back from it after the 10 years. Is there installation charges? Is there maintenance and supplies? Do they train you? Do they send someone down to your kitchen and train all your guys, or are you doing that yourself? So is there some sort of effect on labor cost, either a reduction or an increase? So training is an increase of all the labor costs, but is it going to save us a bunch of time? So all of a sudden people are getting out there at the end of the night 30 minutes quicker because it's not that difficult to clean this piece of equipment. So these are all the things that we want to know. And then finally, you have something like this. So this is 3 different models for a stove. They're showing you the cash amount. So it's 5,000, 55, and 53. So really when I'm looking at this, because it's such a close one, it really doesn't matter what the price is. I'm not concerned. Rather, what I would probably want to look at is, what is the estimated life? So here I'm paying $500 more for 2 more years. Here I'm paying $300 more than the first model for 10 or for 5 more years of use. So I get 10 years total. So if I was to take 5,300 and divide it by 10, that's quite a bit different than 5,000 divided by 5. There's also the trade-in value. So what kind of trade-in value at the end of the life? Cash from sale of the old machine that you're going to be getting rid of, installation costs, initial year's training, annual maintenance contract. So yeah, this one lasts 10 years, but we have to pay $450 every single year for someone to come in and maintain it. That's $4,500. So it's not a $5,300 stove. It's a $9,800 stove. $5,300 plus 10 years of maintenance, plus 10 years of annual cost of supplies. So I'm going to have to use another $2,500 in supplies here. So there's a lot of things you want to look at before you just decide which stove that you want.